for the lads, I don't need to tell you, the G7 starts tomorrow. The UK are hosting, and where better to take your near pensioner age mates for the weekend than Cornwall. And how exciting to have the cream of the international crop all in one place, and then the jam of the international crop just underneath. The G7, also known as the Group of Seven, is an international organisation made to fight crime. No, sorry, wrong one. It's made up of the world's 7 largest advanced economies. Ugh, I hear you. Snooze. But it's actually a really good weekend for geopolitical gossip. This is the weekend for tea. Think Real Housewives of everywhere. Speaking of gossip, it was known as the G8 until Russia left the group. I went to an all-girls school, so I do understand cutting out a toxic friend. But ask Russia, and she'll tell you she actually left the group because they couldn't handle her coming into her power. Yeesh. So, who is going to be there? Well, making their virgin turns at this year's summit are newcomers Italy's Mario Draghi, Japan's Yoshihide Suga, and America's Joe Biden. Now, Mario used to be head of the European Central Bank, ka-ching. Let me tell you, though, he does not enjoy Mario jokes, although the dude literally collected gold coins for a living, so some people don't want to be helped. Mario is set to replace Merkel as Macron's new ally in keeping the EU together because baby Angela deserves a holiday, to be fair. Last of the noobs is Joe Biden, who's also making his first overseas trip since becoming president. Good for him. At his age, it's so rare you get to do anything you haven't done before. Joe is going to the G7 to discuss the group's plan to create an international corporation tax. But he does really have to focus because it's Cornwall and Joe loves an ice cream. Other big players are Angela Merkel, who's essentially on a farewell tour, so I hope she gets hammered and tells all these boys what she really thinks of them. Trudeau, he talks the talk, but don't let the Canadians' good manners fool you. I've heard Canada's climate record is actually the worst of the G7 nations. Yeah, worse than the States. Do not be fooled by this man's hair. Emmanuel Macron will be in attendance from France. France recently singled out the UK for a travel ban, so them showing up here is pretty rich. Lastly, Boris Johnson will have to spend the weekend explaining why he didn't invite any of them to his wedding. In many ways, the G7 is the best part of a wedding. Boris will presumably be focusing on the vaccine rollout rather than the death toll, because the host has to keep it light, guys. Other official invites have gone out to non-member countries because Johnson's teacher made him invite everyone in his class. Notably, Australia's PM, Scott Morrison, accepted, presumably so he could gloat all weekend. And India's Modi will be zooming in so that when people ask him how things are going, he can pretend to be frozen. But Catherine, what do they do? Well, aside from a weekend by the seaside, everyone promises to be a very good little leader and do very nice things all year, though none of it's legally binding and they only police themselves. So, no, I guess it is a weekend at the seaside. If you want a measure of how effective they've been since the last G7, the last agenda was global warming, global trade and taxing big tech companies. Of the environment at the time, Macron said, "Our house is burning down," literally. And if you want a hint as to how well they did sticking to their commitments, this year's agenda is global warming, global trade and taxing big companies. So the house is still on fire. But now a plague be upon it too. Since promising to do better on the environment at the last G7, G7 nations have been pumping more money into fossil fuel companies than green energy. Great work, guys. And while not doing so itself, the UK has urged Australia to improve their net zero carbon emission target ahead of the conference. Shade. Truth bomb, the UK made the highest per capita commitment to fossil fuels of the G7. But PM Scott Morrison has claimed that Australia are going to use the Frank Sinatra approach to climate policy, saying, "We're going to do it our way." Shame. I assumed he was going to take all the world's carbon and then fly it to the moon. And all of this is before they even get to the COVID crisis. Totally doable in one weekend. Don't worry, though, because this make or break conference is being curated by the one woman we know can get things done when she wants them. Carrie Johnson will be playing host to the Global Leaders Partners. Pressure is on for Carrie, partly because the future of the world is at stake and partly because at the end of the night, all of the world leaders are filmed in a cab, scoring her 9 out of 10. I can only imagine, having missed out on a lavish wedding reception, Carrie is enjoying the table arrangement challenge. So her hubby can't sit next to Biden because then he might have to tax big corporations, but also can't chat to France because what if they're serving fish and that whole riot starts up again? Draghi and Macron will definitely want to sit together because they're like any power couple in suits, and honestly, I get it, I'm gay. But also, where do you put Merkel? Because there's only 2 halves to any BFF necklace. I guess she could sit with Canada and then they could just talk about COVID. And you know what? Merkel deserves to flirt with Trudeau on her last work night out. So I guess that just leaves the US with Japan. I'm sure that'll be fine, Carrie. So, with so much hanging in the balance, here's hoping some actionable decisions will be made. And if not, well, don't worry, they'll just do exactly the same again next year. Cheers.